Hello and thanks for joining us here on TVB News. Hong Kong reported 15 more COVID-19 cases today and are on a dozen preliminary positive cases.
Meanwhile, another coronavirus patient died, bringing the city's death toll to 88.
A third of the newly reported cases have unknown sources of infection. Among the patients are a 73-year-old part-time taxi driver and a 29-year-old police officer who works at the police headquarters in Wan Chai.
For the taxi driver, he's a day shift driver in the morning. Except for work, he lives in Tuen Mun and may visit Yan Ngoi Mall or the market nearby. For the police officer, he did not have contact with the public during work, and he lives in Cheung Sa Wan.
The other infections with unidentifiable sources include 2 cleaners working at Pacific Place and the Hong Kong Cricket Club, respectively. As for the cases linked to previous infection clusters, another nurse who works at a private clinic in Yuen Long has tested positive for the virus. 3 more residents of the Hong Chi Lei Muk Shu Hostel have been infected. So far, 17 staff members or residents of the care home for the mentally disabled have come down with the virus. Authorities also highlighted the case of a woman who is 39 weeks pregnant. She was admitted to Tuen Mun Hospital yesterday morning, claiming she had a fever. Medical staff found she was not having a fever at the time and admitted her to the general ward. Last night, she tested preliminary positive for the coronavirus. Now, 10 other patients in the ward have been sent to quarantine.
Usually, we will arrange preliminary suspected case to isolation ward or surveillance ward for further management. It's not optimal about the arrangement for admission of this case. That's why we will review the case and see if there is any improvement arrangement can be implemented soon.
Meanwhile, 5 imported cases today include arrivals from the Philippines and India.
Some members of the pro-democracy camp and a public hospital labor union are urging people to boycott the universal virus testing scheme scheduled to begin Tuesday.
As Haley Zhou reports, they claim there is a risk of community outbreaks as well as questions surrounding a lab involved in the testing.
If Hong Kong citizens goes through the universal testing in the latency period, incubation period, the false negative rate would be quite high. This would cause a big harmful disaster to the city because they would think that they are very healthy.
There are more reasons why the Hospital Authority Employees Alliance is urging Hong Kongers not to go for a free virus test. They also say mass testing only works when the entire population is tested within a short space of time under a lockdown, the conditions that can't be met in Hong Kong, leaving the effectiveness of the whole scheme in question. They also say taking nasal and throat samples often induces coughs and sneezes. And if those taking samples do not change their protective gowns between each sample taking, they say sample collection centers could become the center of infection clusters. Furthermore, for democracy activists, the fact that BGI-affiliated Sunrise Diagnostic Center is involved in the scheme is another reason for a boycott. 2 subsidiaries of BGI are on a U.S. economic blacklist of companies implicated in human rights violations against Uyghurs.
The company invited by Hong Kong government to conduct and provide the testing service is already sanctioned by U.S. government. With how the experience of that red capital companies provide the service in Xinjiang re-education camp and with the DNA collection for Uyghurs, etc.
Meanwhile, the government is stepping up the promotion of the scheme. It told a public broadcaster that it spent about $2.6 million to run ads in newspapers. More than 418,000 people have signed up as of this afternoon. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
The Secretary for Innovation and Technology stressed that the Hong Kong health code system will enter service once the local epidemic situation is under control. He also explained why the test results of the Universal Community Testing Program cannot be used to apply for the planned health code. Caleb Leung has more.
Some welcoming news for those who need to go to Macau or Guangdong province. The innovation chief said the Hong Kong health code system, which allowed quarantine-free entry to the two places, may be launched in 2 weeks' time at the earliest.
So far, our situation is not yet stable, so I suppose it may take a few weeks' time before we can really have the health code accepted by the three local authorities before the travel can be really useful.
Sit also explained why the public couldn't use the results of the Universal Community Testing Program to apply for the planned health code.
For the Universal Community Testing Program, it will end on before mid of September. So at that time, the validity of those testing results may not be useful for them to apply for the travel code.
Some have earlier expressed concerns over their privacy when they enter Guangdong or Macau. That's because they are required to have their health code scanned whenever they enter a public place, allowing local authorities to keep track of their whereabouts.
When the Hong Kong people, they travel to overseas, they need to comply with the local legislation of those places. So when they travel to Guangdong or to Macau, when they need to work or stay there, they need to comply with the legislation or the administrative arrangement of that place.
Sit also reminded the public that it would only take a few minutes to apply for a Hong Kong health code, but it may take a day or two for the test results to come out. KW TVB News.
5 staff members of the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department have been sent to quarantine after handling the body of a deceased COVID-19 patient. The workers were called to Chung Kwan O Hospital to pick up the body on Wednesday night. The deceased tested preliminary positive for COVID-19 and was a close contact of a confirmed patient. The workers were not told about that when they picked up the body, and they only had masks and gloves as their personal protective equipment. The hospital authority has issued a new guideline after the incident, asking hospitals to signify the bodies of those who tested positive for COVID-19 with yellow labels.
The welfare chief noted there's been fewer domestic helpers coming into town or waiting for visa renewals. Lo Chi-kwong wrote on his blog today that since anti-epidemic measures have been introduced, the number of domestic helpers arriving Hong Kong daily has been reduced. He added the number of helpers waiting for renewed visas has plummeted from 6,000 earlier this month to 1,700 these days. Recently, helpers who tested positive for the virus sparked concerns, as many of them would gather in crowds during their holidays.
Beijing is criticizing a trip to Taiwan by the head of the Czech Senate. Miloš Vystrčil is there to promote business links and is the most senior Czech official to ever visit the island. He and his delegation were greeted at Taoyuan International Airport by the Foreign Minister of Taiwan, Joseph Wu. The Czech delegation is scheduled to meet with President Tsai Ing-wen during their 6-day trip. The visit has angered Beijing, who say it is despicable and undermines the political foundation of China-Czech relations. Ties between China and the Czech Republic cooled after a sister city agreement between Beijing and Prague was severed. The problem occurred when China refused to remove language dictating the Czech capital city's government endorse the One China principle that defines Taiwan as a part of China. Beijing considers the island part of its territory. New footage of military training on the Liaoning aircraft showed J-15 fighter jets are now carrying missiles. The footage, released by state broadcaster CCTV, was accompanied by an interview with military expert Yin Zuo. Yin said the planes that took off from the carrier during the exercise have test-fired the missiles they were carrying. He also said the J-15 fighters have combat capability.
U.S. President Donald Trump got a first-hand look at the damage caused by Hurricane Laura, which killed at least 15 people.
The visit also comes days after the Republican National Convention and is being viewed as a way to protect Trump's empathy and leadership. 2 days after Hurricane Laura slammed the U.S. Gulf Coast, U.S. President Donald Trump surveyed the damage. The Category 4 storm ripped through Louisiana and Texas with 240-kilometer-hour winds wreaking havoc with heavy winds and floods. Laura was the most powerful hurricane ever to hit Louisiana, surpassing even Hurricane Katrina 15 years ago.
I'm here to support the great people of Louisiana. It's been a tremendous state for me. I love the people. We've had a good relationship right from the beginning. It's very important that I was here. And Already met some people that have been absolutely devastated. This was a tremendously powerful storm.
During the 2 hours he spent in Lake Charles, Louisiana, Trump met with officials and relief workers. He did not interact with any residents whose homes had been ripped apart. Trump has sometimes struggled with his role as consoler-in-chief, failing to project empathy when visiting places hard hit by tragedy and disaster. Right now, his compassion is also needed in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Saturday, roughly 1,000 people gathered again for a march and rally against police violence. The city is in chaos over recent events. Tuesday, 2 protesters were killed by a 17-year-old armed civilian who carried an AR-15-style rifle near police without being challenged. The killings came amid protests after the police shooting of Jacob Blake that left the black man paralyzed. More than 1,000 National Guard members had been deployed to help keep the peace there. Asked about the situation, Trump merely said there's an investigation into the shooting by the teen gunman.
And they'll be reporting back to me over the next 24 hours, 48 hours maybe max, and we'll have a comment about it. But that is right now we're looking at it very, very carefully. What we are doing with it's a great state, Wisconsin, great state, and they should not have to put up with what they went through. And so the National Guard has done a fantastic job. Any other questions?
The top U.S. intelligence official has informed Congress that his office will no longer give in-person election security briefings on Capitol Hill. Written reports will be provided instead. The move raised concern among lawmakers about the public's right to know about foreign interference in the November 3rd election.
Donald Trump said the National Intelligence Director made the decision due to alleged leaked information, and the U.S. president pointed the finger at the man that oversaw his impeachment trial.
Director Ratcliffe brought information into the committee, and the information leaked. Whether it was Shifty Schiff or somebody else, they leak the information before it gets in. And what's even worse, they leak the wrong information. And he got tired of it. So he wants to do it in a different forum because you have leakers on the committee. Obviously, leakers that are doing bad things. Probably not even legal to leak, but we'll look into that separately.
Hello and a warm welcome back to TVB News. In Europe, protests against coronavirus measures erupted in various countries yesterday. The largest one took place in the German capital, Berlin. Smaller demonstrations also got underway in London and Paris.
The participants claim their civil rights have been infringed by lockdown measures. Daniel Rowell has more on this story.
Berlin police broke up mass protests against Germany's coronavirus lockdown measures on Saturday, arresting 300 people. 200 arrests were made at a rally near the iconic Brandenburg Gate. More participants were apprehended near the city's Russian embassy after rocks and bottles were reportedly thrown. Extremists also attempted to storm the Reichstag before being intercepted by police. In total, 38,000 demonstrators gathered in the city, many of whom did not wear masks or practice social distancing. Berlin's local council originally banned the protests, but a regional court overruled the decision late on Friday, allowing them to go ahead. The city's police chief has since dubbed those taking part irresponsible. Other large-scale protests in defiance of coronavirus lockdown restrictions took place in London, as well as Paris, Vienna, and Zurich. Common themes during the rallies include the suggestion that the spread of COVID-19 has been exacerbated by 5G masts. Others argued the pandemic could be a hoax. They called for an end to compulsory mask wearing. The protesters' claims stand in stark contrast to the message put forward by German Chancellor Angela Merkel last Thursday. Merkel said the public should take the pandemic seriously, warning that it would likely worsen with the onset of winter. She also ratified a bill to financially penalize those who don't wear face masks in public. Germany has so far recorded 242,000 coronavirus infections and 9,297 deaths, a lower tally than many other EU countries. Daniel Rowell, TVB News.
Italy's Coast Guard sent help to a rescue boat funded by British street artist Banksy on Saturday. This after the vessel issued an urgent call for assistance. The boat named Louise Michel appealed for help on Twitter Friday night after becoming stranded off the coast of Malta. It had earlier picked up migrants off the coast of Libya. The crew said they had been unable to find a stable port for the migrants to disembark, adding the boat was vastly overcrowded. The 219 migrants on board have now been transferred to Italian Coast Guard and humanitarian ships after coordinated responses to the pleas were launched. One of the passengers has, however, reportedly died. The boat's crew have now called on the EU to provide a safe refuge for the transport migrants.
Police have broken up a multinational drug smuggling ring. In the largest sting of the year, they seized drugs worth some $170 million.
As Dong Yao Ne reports, this is part of a recent spike in drug trafficking brought on by the pandemic.
More than 170 kilos of drugs, including meth and heroin, were seized from an industrial building in Fan Lane. In an intelligence-led operation last week, police searched thousands of cases of cargo and found drugs hidden in hundreds of bottled drinks.
I can't say that it is a rare method of concealment. Previously, we have cases about drugs being concealed disguised as a red wine.
2 foreign men were arrested at the scene. Police believe they are members of a transnational drug trafficking group. This latest bust is part of a surging global drug smuggling trend, coming in larger sizes and with new ways of trafficking.
Making an example for methamphetamine and cocaine, the seizures are rocketing by multiples compared to a decade ago.
Hong Kong police uncovered at least 4 cases involving more than $100 million this year. The meth seized in the first half of 2020 is 20 times greater than the same period last year. Heroin seizures have nearly doubled. Total seizures of the 2 drugs this year have already surpassed the combined total of 2018 and 2019. Police have linked the trafficking trend to the rising volume of freight being shipped during the outbreak.
Due to the pandemic, we have tightened immigration control measures in various countries. The mode of drug trafficking has shifted to cargo imports. The freight transportation generally involves a relatively high cost. It may cause drug dealers to smuggle more drugs at a time and increase the number of larger seizures.
The 2 men involved have been charged for allegedly selling dangerous drugs. Their hearing is scheduled for Monday at the Fan Lane Magistrates Courts. Dong Yao Ne, TVB News.
At least 11 people were ticketed this afternoon for breaching social distancing rules by gathering in a shopping mall in Mongkok. At around 2 p.m., a crowd started gathering at Moko Mall and shouted slogans about Hong Kong independence. They also sang anti-government songs. A score of police officers entered the mall and ordered the crowd to disperse. 11 people were ticketed for allegedly breaching social distancing rules and the pandemic. And there were also a crowd gathering at Langham Place in Mongkok at around 5 p.m. The police gave warnings to those who were chanting the slogan, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times," saying they were breaching the national security law.
That's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Bye for now.